Hello and welcome to the first one for a while. This is Pro Football Spot Seahawks Google Hangout broadcast. The first one of probably a few we're going to do over the off-season, but the very, very long off-season. As always, I'm joined, not as always, but most of the time, I'm joined by Ken over in Madison. How are you doing, Ken?
Doing good, Stuart. How are you doing?
Too bad. How's 2016 treating you so far?
Not too shabby. My major's all wrapping up, it seems like. Got some business classes on the side, so getting a well-rounded education over here and enjoying some college basketball stateside.
Nice. Enjoying some well-rounded education at what's regarded one of the party colleges in America, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. We've got quite a reputation for that, but I'm holding my
own. Cool. Well, we'll start off just quickly. It's the first one we've done since I think Cincinnati was the last one. Looking at my pad I've got here, a lot happened between then and now. What were your thoughts on the end of the 2015 season? Mainly for the Seahawks, how it ended in Carolina with a 31-point gap. Not just a little bit too much to overturn. But what were your end of season thoughts, looking ahead and looking back?
Sure. Well, like we were discussing those first few weeks, I mean, it was coming out of nowhere. I mean, going into the fourth quarters, it looked like the Seahawks were going to be good, and then we hit a bunch of snags. And luckily, the passing game really came together in that second half, and it was really something we weren't accustomed to seeing. But Russell Wilson just put the entire offense on his back. I really enjoyed getting a lot of spread formations, a lot of wide receivers out on the field that Wilson could go to, and he was getting the ball out quickly, because the offensive line is still going to need some work. I'm sure we're going to dwell on that throughout this entire offseason. But, I mean, Wilson, really had an MVP caliber second half that propelled us into the playoffs. And there were a couple of great wins. I mean, that win at Arizona was the complete opposite of what I was expecting. I thought Arizona was going to take some momentum into the playoffs, and we just came in there and knocked them back a couple paces. And the playoffs were quite interesting. I mean, Blair Walsh's missed field goal, you don't see one of those very often, and we got quite lucky there. Minnesota it's a sneaky team. I mean, their offense is kind of one-sided with their running game, but the way their defense is shaping up every single year, and Teddy Bridgewater, if he keeps developing, Minnesota's going to be a good team. So I didn't really fault the Seahawks for kind of a lackluster wild card weekend. And then the Panther game, it was a brutal first half. I mean, even if we got into scoring distance, Hauschka couldn't come through, which is something we don't hear a lot of. And my dad actually wanted to change the channel come halftime, and I said, no, we're gonna stick through this thing to the very end. And it was one of the most entertaining second halves I'd seen the entire year, not just for the Seahawks schedule, but around the NFL. And to fall so short was devastating, but at the same time, to see the team come together and put together a half hour of phenomenal football. They made a lot of good adjustments on the defensive end, actually getting Cam Newton slightly uncomfortable as opposed to that uncontested first half. It was a good final fight for the Hawks, and just a disappointing finish. And as for the rest of the playoffs, I mean, Carolina looked like a really dangerous team. I think they deserve to be in the Super Bowl. That defense reminded me a lot of our Super Bowl winning team a couple of years ago. And Peyton Manning, I mean, you can't win it anymore. I mean, 200, he got it with a Super Bowl win. He didn't have to do a ton to get it, but that defense was incredible. Made for a really fun Super Bowl, and I'm glad the Broncos were able to edge out the Panthers just for some pride over here. And I really hope Peyton Manning hangs it up after this one. So a good overall season, obviously not as far as the Seahawks would like, but a good fight. And there are a lot of encouraging moments here and there throughout.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. I think we might as well just wrap it up there, actually. After the Cincinnati game, it did kind of come together. I think it all started with, in terms of the team being put on Wilson's back, I think it started in the Pittsburgh game. I think that was when we saw the first glimpses. Obviously, Jimmy Graham got injured, which derailed some of that probably for the rest of the season. But they went toe to toe with one of the best offenses in the league not just this season, over the last 2 or 3 years since Todd Haley's been in that building, and they went out with, despite giving up a 100-yard receiver, despite Marcus Wheaton, of all people, being the bugbear for most of the day. For the rest of the season, as you said, Wilson just carried the team to a certain extent, particularly obviously after Thomas Rawls went down as well. Christian Michael did just about enough. Fred Jackson was valuable than we probably realised he was going to be when he walked in with Christian Michael and Bryce Brown and Derek Coleman getting a technical start in one of the games as well. And then the Minnesota game was just brutal, nervous. It's as nervous as I thought we'd win, but I thought it would be a bit different. So I think the weather played a bigger part than anyone anticipated it playing. And that Blair Walsh field goal, it's one of those moments where you just think someone was looking down and giving it a good Augusta win to play that wide, because Blair Walsh is one of the more reliable kickers in the league.
Yeah.
He made 3 field goals earlier in the game from further out than that. But that's sometimes it happens. And Carolina was just, before they even sat down at the bar, watched the game out with some fellow local Seahawks fans. It was 14-0. So, there was the temptation to turn around and go home was very real at that point. But stuck it out, and Russell Wilson, I think, as we saw the week after with Arizona, how they just capitulated when the scoreboard got heavy to Carolina's side. It's a testament to the coaching job that Pete Carroll did at halftime and throughout that game to keep on going, to keep, obviously, all the sound effects come out with Wilson saying, like, never in doubt and all that stuff. But it was, as you say, one of the more fun second halves of football you're going to see, because all they needed was 3 minutes, really, one stop earlier in the I think Olsen converted a big third down dead on the first down marker, and that was kind of all she wrote, really. Yeah. Carolina were the best team in the National Football League for more consistently than anyone else, so they definitely did deserve to get in the Super Bowl. The Broncos defense was just that. It was incredible. I mean, the Super Bowl was not a very good, easy watch for a neutral or someone getting into the sport, but I was glad the Broncos win, and I agree. I think Peyton Manning, I think it's if he's going to go out, that's the way to go out. And it would mean some money, so it was a good night that night.
Yeah.
Obviously, since the Super Bowl, during the Super Bowl, the era of one Marshall Lynch came to an end in Seattle. There wasn't much surprise. Probably the only surprise with it was how early he decided to, I guess he's announced it. He hasn't said anything else apart from that picture. But were you surprised at the timing, and what do you think his legacy will be for this team, for this franchise, for 5-10 years down the line?
Sure. Initially, I was quite surprised that he chose a Super Bowl. I mean, that was late in the third quarter, I believe. I had just stumbled on Twitter just to see what people were thinking about the Super Bowl. And all of a sudden, everybody's retweeting the image and the peace emoji. And I was like, wow. And when I thought about it a couple of minutes later, it made more sense. Because it was quintessential Marshawn Lynch. Never one to soak up the spotlight, never one to really want all that attention. It was always just about that action, boss. I mean, just let his play on the field speak for him. And I mean, he was just his cool self. I mean, off the field, and football was just his thing. And he didn't want to be, a face of an entire NFL or even the face of the Seahawks franchise. But I think in a lot of ways he kind of was. I'm going to miss his personality. You don't really see that a lot in the NFL nowadays. I mean, even in college football, I don't know how much exposure you guys get over in the UK, but I mean, over here, any kind of media snafu occurs with college athletes, it's immediately like, oh, this guy's got an attitude problem and he shouldn't be answering questions this way and he shouldn't not want to talk to the media at all. And Marshawn Lynch is just, I don't care. I don't want to talk. I don't want to be in the attention. I just want to go out and play football. And it's one of the things I'll miss most about him. And obviously you think back of both Beastquakes and several great runs that you could put a awesome highlight reel film together. And then for a run-first offense like Seattle, he just fit the bill perfectly when they acquired him, and he was a fan favorite from the start and got a ton of results and such a workhorse every single year. And I think it finally caught up to him this year with the couple of injuries that kept tweaking him all throughout the year. So it's a good call for him to want to hang it up being on top. I mean, a recent championship, almost 2 in a row. You can't really beat that. And particularly in an age where running backs are no longer the forefront. I mean, to have a career like he did, particularly in the second half of his career with Seattle, that's really special. And so overall, it's a good move for him. I'm going to miss all that he brought to the field and off the field, but it's a smart career choice for him because now he can work with his charities, work in his neighborhood, and do all the things he'll want to do with his body still intact.
Yeah, I think again you hit the nail on the head. I think he set the tone not only on the field, but I think he set the tone off the field when probably Pete Carroll was trying to search for someone like that to be held up against, kind of thing. This is how we want to go about our business. This is how we want to do this. This is how we want to do that. Whilst letting all the players be themselves, like Sherman and Earl and Russell Wilson doing all his endorsements and stuff. But yeah, it's sad. It wasn't sad at the time because obviously the Super Bowl was in full swing. If that Super Bowl could get in full swing, but think about it: the day after, the morning after, the next few days, there was a tinge of sadness there because we weren't going to see 24. We weren't going to see that running style run through tackles or try and run through our offensive line. Defensive line that we come across. But yeah, he just set the tone in every aspect that you could wish to set the tone. And for him to retire like he did, like he has, as you say, it's just absolutely perfect. Marshawn Lynch, there's no one else who could probably get away with doing that. Obviously, you saw Charles Woodson had all the ceremonies he had. Obviously, clearly deserved all the praise and all the regalia he had with his retirement. You got Heath Miller thanking everyone under the sun in Pittsburgh, and then Marshawn Lynch just sends one simple picture and one simple tweet, and he's gone. The 24 is no more in Seattle. Looking further ahead, more with Marshawn Lynch, do you think he's a Hall of Famer in 5 years' time or however many?
I think so. It's obviously going to be a controversial conversation based on his attention and immediate attitude towards members of the NFL. I think a lot of people are polarized against him and for him, so I think there's going to be sizable camps going both ways. I'm not quite sure which way it would end up, just because he's such an unorthodox character. But the work he put in on the football field, I think, definitely garners him at least serious consideration. I mean, to be such a workhorse for a team, like we said, I mean, in seasons where running backs are no longer, I mean, it's rare to see them being first-round draft picks anymore. It really says a lot about what he could do against really fast and strong defenses to put up fantastic numbers. I mean, 1,000 yards almost every single season.
Yeah, and it was quite a career revival, wasn't it? Because he was in trouble with the law quite a bit in Buffalo. He was not having a great time. I mean, the price we paid to bring him over to Seattle was not a lot in hindsight. I think it was the 4th or the 5th round or 3rd or 5th round or something like that over 2 separate years. So to go from being cast away like he was to then me asking the question 5-6 years later if he's going to be Hall of Fame, it just shows how big of an impact he had on the team and how well he played and how big of an impact he had league-wide, because there is no one else like Marshawn Lynch. You got Todd Gurley's, Marvin Gordon too, who although he struggled in his rookie year, got Thomas Rawls obviously coming up in Seattle. But there's no one in the league. There's no one at the position like Marshawn Lynch, and that's one reason it's going to be a bit weird not watching him play on Sundays come September. Obviously, this week is when draft season really starts to kick up again with the whole league, scouts, and 200 or however many there are of draft prospects coming together in Indianapolis for the combine. Are you looking forward to it? Are you going to be able to watch any of it this week? Or
I think I'll be able to catch some of it. I've got some Broadcasters Association conferences to attend in the upcoming weekend, so I'll be busy networking. But I'll try and catch what I can. I definitely want to see Braxton Miller run his 40 because I'm sure it's going to be record-setting. What a tremendous athlete. There are a couple Wisconsin Badgers that I'll be interested in, and of course all the first-round talent. I mean, it's such a defensively stocked draft this upcoming late April, and I mean the Seahawks are going to have a great number of selections both on the offensive and defensive side. So a ton of good raw talent that they could mold, and I'll see what they have to offer. I mean, it's not the most fun thing I'll ever watch, the combine, but there are moments where you can really see this guy might turn into something. And so those little moments are cool, so I'll try and catch as much as I can.
Yeah, I think I'm off work this week, so I'll be trying to watch some of it. As you said, it's not exactly exciting thing to watch, but it's more the analysis that the people on the TV screens and obviously on Twitter and stuff will be giving to help explain why it's impressive. But even just to the naked eye, you can see, as I say, Braxton Miller is going to be one of the names people are going to be talking about as he continues his conversion to a wide receiver. Are there any other names that you're looking out? Maybe some that people ain't talking about too much at the minute?
Well, I mean, defense is going to get a lot of attention, but I think particularly in the Super Bowl, it generated a lot of discussion over the development of offensive tackles because those Carolina tackles were just getting manhandled the entire game. And so I'd like to see what kind of like color commentary goes on when the tackles start going through their drills, and maybe which ones are going to generate more interest, what drills more scouts are going to look at for these tackles. Because we really don't see a lot of elite guys who can protect the edges of the offensive line anymore. So, I mean, obviously both you and I like Jack Conklin, so I want to see how well he does. And I've heard a lot of talk about Ohio State's Taylor Decker. He might be available at 26 for the Seahawks. So, I mean, just the offensive tackle position as a whole, I want to see how the combine handles the coverage of those drills, and if there's any kind of explanation over why the overall skill of the position has seemed to decrease over the last several years.
Yeah, and it's something that Tom Cable's preached and pushed forward the last few summers, obviously with all the converts, obviously J.R. Sweeting, Christian Sokoli, and Drew Nowak, I think, was a convert as well. And he said, well, because it's the same, they're basically the same as the tackle O-line people, the O-line prospects coming out of college are at the same level as them because the coaching with all the spread offenses in college is just holding them back. So I think Conklin is the one guy I will be keen in on because I watched him I think he's the second person I watched this year, and he is after Tunsil, he's my favourite tackle I've watched. Tunsil just looks smooth as silk, but Conklin's an absolute mauler. He easily could play pretty much 4 of the 5 spots in the NFL. And he would be at a better level than what we had in 4 of those 5 spots last year. So if he lasts till 26 is probably another question. There's another guy I'm looking forward to watching. I wrote about the Baylor kid, Andrew Billings, who he's 19 or 20. He is an absolute phenom. To be that strong and to be that, I mean, he's taking up triple teams. When you watch him, he's taking triple teams and pushing them backwards. And it's just, he's someone I don't think will last till 26. If he definitely won't last till 56. But one player I'm looking forward to seeing is Sean Davis, the Maryland corner. He seems to have, I've only watched 1 or 2 of his games so far, but he is someone who seems to have the look of a Seahawk corner, somewhat how he closes on the ball is very is really, really pops when you're watching. So he'll be someone I'll be watching. But I think the main, as you said, it's a very defensive line driven drafts as well. But I think Conklin and all the O-linemen will be the people I'll be keen in on. And then obviously Braxton Miller just for the pure fun of it.
Right.
Yeah. No, obviously after the combine, March 7th, I think it is, the league year begins afresh with free agency. Last year we started off free agency with the minor deal to bring Jimmy Graham to town. I mean, that didn't really get any coverage. Do you think the Seahawks will be busy this free agency period, or?
I certainly expect them to be shopping around and seeing what kind of deals they can get. Obviously, the top guys are going to go for big money elsewhere. I mean, it would, in an ideal world, having the cap space to try and lure a guy like Von Miller over to Seattle to try and make the defense even better would be awesome, but that's just not going to happen.
I mean, he's going to be franchise tagged, yeah? I think that's what...
It makes sense. It makes sense. If I'm Denver, I'd like to lock him up long term.
Yeah, but I think the franchise tag, I think we did with Doug Baldwin, didn't we, where we tagged him, and, well, not tagged him, it was the tender tag, wasn't it? And then you just put all the stuff on him. Yeah, is there any other more realistic names you'd like to see come to Seattle?
I like the discussion over Martellus Bennett for tight end. Good mauler, good size, could maybe have some blocking techniques. I really like Kelechi Osemele, who will be entering his first year of free agency. I mean, his draft contract is now up with the Baltimore Ravens, former second-round pick. At left guard, slid over to left tackle when Eugene Monroe went down for Baltimore this year. Baltimore had about 25 injuries to their roster, so you got to look at what Osemele could do both at the guard and tackle spots. And I mean, versatility is something the Seahawks love. I'm sure he's going to be looking for some kind of good money. I think he's one of the free agents who people might not see maximum value in him yet. So he could be a worthwhile guy. It all depends on the market. I mean, I'll have to see what Russell Okung is expecting to get and see how that translates over to a younger up-and-coming star like Osemele. But if he's in the market price for Seattle, I think Osemele is a fantastic target. Good run blocker. I mean, he was really one of the instrumental guys on the line that helped Justin Forsett have a revitalization a couple of years ago with Baltimore. So I think that's my number one ideal free agent move, because offensive line just has to be addressed in one way or another.
Unquestionably, I think it might be one. It'll either be something that they add veterans to, or they just go all in for the draft again, and maybe even let people like Sweezy go and replace him with Glowinski. Terry Paul still in the building. Obviously got Sokoli, who Pete Carroll mentioned on the end of season press conference as someone to watch out for, to keep an eye on for the next for the summer and stuff. So yeah, for me, in our direct messages, I mentioned him. But since that, I've seen the money he's been touted, and I don't think it's going to happen anymore. But Olivier Vernon is my number one. I think in Seattle, it would be quite something. Cassius Marsh, he seemed to step up a bit last year. Obviously, Frank Clark, got Michael Bennett, probably still going to be around. Cliff Averill, maybe Bruce Irvin, but I don't think so. And then you've got, yeah, and I think Olivier Vernon at the right price which is something you're going to put to every person you link to Seattle this year, is at the right price, because of just the sheer number of free agents they've got to try and keep. But I think Olivier Vernon, and obviously someone who is just before we come on here, apparently he reported he's opting out of his contract. Alex Mack, the Cleveland Browns center, is ideal. I think he was someone that threatened to do this last year. Obviously, with Unger going to New Orleans, he was someone who was feasible that we could make a deal for. Now, if he's opting out of his contract, does he want more money, or does he just want to get the hell out of that building? something won't know probably until he signs his next contract. But Alex Mack and Oliver Vernon, but to a lesser degree, I'm going to ask you what you think of the chances this happens. You mentioned Martellus Bennett. Another Chicago Bear is obviously on the market, a long time Chicago Bear. Matt Forte, he said he no longer cares about the money, he wants to chase the ring. He has the New England Patriots written all over him. But would you see him in Seattle on a deal similar to what they give Fred Jackson, or?
It really hadn't crossed my mind. I thought immediately, like you said, Patriots for sure. Even the Green Bay Packers, if they choose not to re-sign their backup James Starks, he could be an option for them. I mean, good on the stretch runs, obviously a great receiver, and with the way Tom Brady throws a ton to his running backs, I think that's a match made in heaven. It didn't really occur to me, though. I mean, I like what Thomas Rawls was able to do, and if they keep a backup like Bryce Brown or Christian Michael, I think that's going to get the job done. I hope that ankle injury for Rawls is a fluke. He seemed fairly durable when he was, running for 100 yards every single game, it seemed like. So I'm hoping it's just a one-off thing. So I don't see a lot of investment going in to the running back position. I think you just keep going with Rawls and a capable, under the radar backup. And I guess it'll be interesting to see what Forte wants out of money, because initially I thought maybe $5 million for a 1 year. I mean, if he takes even less to chase a ring, maybe then you consider it, because like Fred Jackson, he adds more ability in the receiving game, which will definitely help after what we just saw, what Russell Wilson is capable of doing when he is fully leading the offense. So I think it's an interesting discussion for John Schneider. It just didn't immediately occur to me, just given the different needs that we have at other positions.
Yeah, I think my main thinking when Matt Forte announced his release was Fred Jackson's 39 or whatever he is. I don't know how old, 34, 35, I think he is.
Yeah, definitely mid-30s.
Yeah, and then you obviously got Thomas Rawls, you got Christian Michael, who's probably going to be 500,000-600,000 1 year deal kind of guy. That is inexperienced. It's a young running back room, so I think it's somewhere without Marshall Lynch knocking around now. It's somewhere you're probably going to need a veteran in there in some form or another. And Matt Forte just fit that bill perfectly for me. I think again it will come down to what the money is, but I think Fred Jackson was 1 year, $900,000. If it's something a little bit north of that, maybe one year, 2.5 million, I'd snap him up, because there's very few dual threat running backs like he is, because he could easily run for 1,000 yards, but he also could catch 30, 40 passes, balls next year. And with the threat of maybe Jimmy Graham being back, you got Doug Baldwin, you got maybe Curse, Paul Richardson's coming back. Obviously, you got Tyler Lockett, and then you add in a running back in the backfield like Rawls and Forte. And obviously the quarterback can run a little bit as well, so it would be fun to see him just for a year or two. And us and but as I said at the start, he's got New England written all over him.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, Forte is only going to be a 12 to 15 carry guy for anyone. I don't think any team is going to want him to be that forefront at running back like he used to be.
Yeah. Another name I haven't written down, which has just come to me, Chris Long, obviously, was part of the call over the weekend in Los Angeles, no, not St. Louis. Add him to the rotation. Obviously, he's had compared to how he started, his last year and a half has not been as strong. But if you put him in a place where he won't be an every down pass rusher, in a place where he could be effective alongside Bennett, Clark, Averill, and all the rest of them, would it be something that you could see as a fit and feasible?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've seen some upside of Chris Long, and he's had some ups and downs, and I think part of that attests to the rest of that defensive line. Aaron Donald had a standout year. Robert Quinn keeps having good year after good year. So he kept kind of get overshadowing, and I think expectations had been so high early on that he's kind of fallen short of that a little bit. So I guess it depends on the money, like we keep saying about Seattle's cap strategy. But like we proved in 2013, a lot of defensive line depth can only help you. And another fresh edge rusher in a guy like Chris Long, it would definitely be an advantage for every down, and allow Michael Bennett to slide inside, give Cliff Averill a couple of rests here and there. And I think it's a nice fit, actually.
Yeah, I think it wasn't something that's jumped out at me straight away, but obviously if you look at them, it's all. I think John Schneider and Pete Carroll, it's a front office which turns over every rock looking to add to the team, and that's a rock that you would see them picking up. Especially, he knows what it's like playing Central Link. He's played us 10, 12 times, however long he's been in the league. He knows what we're about, and he seems the sort of guy who would fit in quite well into the locker room as well. So it would be interesting, but he's probably going to follow in his daddy's footsteps, isn't he, and go to the Bay?
Yeah, it makes sense. And I think the other thing is, injuries. His injury history may not make him as much of a priority if they're looking at free agents to bolster defensive line.
Or expensive. It might not make him expensive. I think that's the same deal with Russell Okung. I think his shoulder injury could be a blessing in disguise for the Seahawks in trying to keep him, because the market will be dry when the window opens March 7th or March 6th. Anyway, talking about Russell Okung, there's 17 free agents, I think it is, that the Seahawks have got pending from the team. Just going to touch on 6 or 7 here. Just a quick fire and just quickly give you thoughts. And if you think they keep, and why, or let go, and why. You've obviously wrote about a few of these in the last few weeks. We'll start with big man Russ up front. Russell Okung, do you think he stays or do you think he goes?
I think he goes. Obviously, you hear the injuries attached to him every single year, not getting a full season with Seattle all the time. Is he an elite left tackle? No, but when he's in there, he does seem to get the job done, protect Russell Wilson at least adequately. So it'll be interesting. I mean, he represents himself, so what he thinks he's worth out in the open market will definitely play into how Seattle goes after him. I think the windows of communication will still be open between the two, but I don't think they're going to be able to retain him. I think he's going to ask for a little bit too much. And for other teams that need a blindside help, I think they'll be offering him a little bit more than what Seattle will.
Yeah, I think Okung is probably. I think there's 2 or 3 which are tough. I think Okung is one of them, because there's not, as we said earlier, there's not many very good top level, especially left tackles in the league. I think, as you saw with what Von Miller and DeMarcus Ware did to the Panthers, with the line which had been pretty spot on for most of the season, they got absolutely destroyed in the Super Bowl. So I think with that, I think I said you could probably only name 3 tackles who you would probably have ahead of Russell Okung who are in the league. I think Trent Williams at Washington's one, Joe Thomas at Cleveland, and then you got Tyron Smith at Dallas. And after that, there's not many other ones who you can say have played better over the last couple of years when he's played than Russell Okung. But again, it comes down to cost. And as I said a few minutes ago, I think his injury could fit in well for the Seahawks in that regard. I think his shoulder injuries, his injury history, will drive his costs down. Whether it drives his costs down enough for the Seahawks to be tempted when they obviously look at the tackles in this draft and in Indianapolis, obviously in the free agents class, whether that will be enough to see him back in Seattle when training camp opens in July is another matter. But I think for me, as it stands right now, looking at what there's out there, I think he's someone that you let him see what's out there. I think he's someone like Tavares Jackson last year. You just let him see if you can get him back on a 1-year, $4 or $5 million deal, and then revisit it. If he can manage 16, 17 games next year, then he could go and chase the pay. Because I think he's someone who he seems like a big part of the community in Seattle. He's got a lot of community projects. His charity. I think he did something the day after the Carolina game with beast mode and all that stuff. But yeah, I think as it stands right now, you let him test the market. As you say, if someone pays him the big money he's obviously going to take, then you just let him go, and then you hope you've either got someone in the building, because I think Gary Gilliam's been touted as someone they can move over there, and that's something I'm going to have to probably come to terms with if it happens.
Yeah.
But I think as it stands, I think Okun is someone that you probably just let him dip his toe in the water. If he comes back, it will be a pretty minor deal. I do not think if he gets paid, it will be by Seattle. If he stays in Seattle, it will be a 1 year, 2 year, 4 or 5 million deal. I think if he leaves, it will be big bucks. Another one is a hometown boy. Only seems to turn up in December and January and February. Jermaine Kearse, if he is to leave, his last game was 11 catches against the Panthers.
Yeah.
The catch at the back of the end zone over Josh Norman, which was a hands catch, which was something that was a rarity for Jermaine Kearse in his first few years in the league. Do you think he stays? Do you think he goes?
This one's a tough one for me. Obviously, I think I'd like to see him come back. I mean, he's been frustrating and inconsistent at times, but when you need him the most, he usually finds a way to contribute. And the other big thing about him is his ability to be a proficient run blocker down the field. It's helped for even bigger runs for the likes of Russell Wilson and a guy like Thomas Rawls. And you don't really see that part of a receiver's game emphasized a lot in this game anymore. It's all about the route running and your ability to get open downfield. But that just adds another dimension to what Seattle likes to do, running the football. So obviously he shouldn't be looking to settle for a hometown discount. He's come up big in big situations, and other teams will key in on that and probably give him some good offers. But I think it suits Kearse well to come back to Seattle, where his talents will be used to the best, and I think be a solid number 3, number 4, depending on how Paul Richardson does in the offseason. He just seems to fit really well in Seattle, and I've been thinking of other teams that might be able to use him better, and I haven't really come up with a ton of solutions. Green Bay comes to mind maybe, but Aaron Rodgers, you see, he needs the long-term chemistry with receivers, and a free agent like Kearse won't immediately come in and gel. Whereas if he comes back to Seattle, he's going to gel very well. And he might have some drops along the way, but more often than not, I think he contributes well enough to the offense. And
also on Green Bay, a free agent like Kearse is not something that Ted Thompson does, really, is it?
Right.
So I think I agree. I think it's a tough one. I think Jermaine Kearse is someone who you could replace relatively easily in this draft on the third day, probably, because as you say, his drops are an issue, but chemistry is important, especially for Russell Wilson, who's had it pretty, if you think about it, we're pretty plain saying he's had the same coaches and most of the same players around him for all 4 or 5 years he's been here. But like Okun, if it gets too rich for the blood in Seattle, I think he's probably going to be playing his ball somewhere else in 2016. But I think it would serve him best if he stayed in Seattle, whether his ego or whether he thinks he deserves to be a number 3, because he probably will be with how Tyler Lockett was looking at the end of the season. That could be something that weighs in the decision from his side if he wants to stay and be a number 3, and how much the Seahawks are willing to pay one of their own who's not going to be a frontline player. Like Sherman obviously got paid, Baldwin got paid, Thomas got paid, Chancellor got paid, Baldwin got paid, obviously. They're all frontline players. Are they going to do the same for someone who, while he's been one of their own, he's not probably going to be as frontline as he has been over his career here so far? So it is an interesting one. I think he will end up staying. I think teams you look at who could need him, who could add him, probably Atlanta, the top of the list for me, with Roddy White probably not being long for there anymore. Obviously, they've got the Justin Hardy they drafted last year, and if you put Jermaine Kearse opposite Julio Jones and Justin Hardy in the middle, and the running back Freeman. That's a different kind of offense for the Falcons. Obviously, he's got Dan Quinn there, who'll be familiar with him for his first few years of the league. But apart from that, as you say, there's not many other teams who you would see outbidding the Seahawks unless someone's been a long-time admirer. I think he had stops at Chicago and San Francisco while he was floating about our practice squad in his rookie year. So they could be two teams that could revisit him. But obviously the people in charge of those two teams have changed since then. So yeah, I think he stays. I think how rich the deal gets, I don't know. But I think Jermaine Kearse will be a Seahawk in 2016. Next one. I think this is probably the easiest one. I think I've tweeted about someone setting the market for him earlier. I think John Ryan. I think it's a pretty slam dunk one. I think he's someone who you just keep. I don't know how you go about it, but he's someone who's clearly important to how they win the field position battle. I mean, it's interesting after the Panthers game, Pete Carroll said that when Ted Ginn fumbled it and recovered it straight away, that they kicked it that way. I don't see how that's possible. I don't see how you can kick once, but not anymore. But he is someone who's clearly important to the field position and special teams. He's been around the team for 6-7 years. I think he's actually the only Seahawks player who hasn't signed a contract with Pete Carroll and John Schneider, which is a quiz answer for future years if he does leave. I think John Ryan's a pretty easy decision. I think we keep him because, again, it's all about chemistry. If you draft one or pick one up on the undrafted free agent market, I think you keep him for a couple more years. He's got a couple more years in that leg, I think.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what he brings with hang time and, like you said, possession, I mean, he's not going to be a bank breaker being a punter. So it should be a fairly easy deal. Looks like he likes playing in Seattle, and he's been on the receiving end of a couple fun trick plays. He's not going to get anywhere else.
No, was it the first Canadian to throw a touchdown in a playoff game or something? Moving on, J.R. Sweezy. Now, he's someone before last season who I was quite bullish about. I thought he would be someone who we treated like we did Cliff Averill and KJ Wright the year before and re-upped him during the season. And then he went and played like that. So I wrote the other week that I think he I can't remember what I wrote actually. But with Glowinski, I think he's someone who you put faith in what you drafted last year. I think this is what I said. I think he's definitely someone you put faith in. Glowinski, you put maybe Terry Paul, Sakoli can move over, Britt can move over. So I think J.R. Sweezy is going to get paid somewhere else. I don't think he's a Seahawk in 2016. Ken?
Yeah, it's I like what you say there. I mean, obviously the way he played, I mean, sometimes he'll look really, really good, and then other times he'll get absolutely thrust aside on the line of scrimmage, and it's really frustrating because you see where his ceiling is on some plays, and then when he's inconsistent, it's quite awful, to be frank. So I think other teams are going to recognize that. I don't think they're going to be offering really, really lucrative amounts of money to him in free agency. But like we're dealing with, Okung might be looking for a little bit too much. And I mean, both you and I really like Glowinski going in, recapping the draft. And Terry Poole may have disappointed early on, but obviously another off season of development, you never know what can happen. And so Glowinski got a little bit of look late in this past season. So I think you hit it right on the head. You give some faith to a guy like Glowinski who can tear it up inside at a guard position and use money elsewhere.
Yeah, I think if you were to give most Seahawks fans a choice between Sweezy and Okung, I think even with all the injuries, I think most of them would hedge the money towards Russell over JR. But do you agree?
Yeah, I mean, when I look at Okung, obviously the injuries are, kind of a guarantee now, and that's kind of frustrating. But when he's in there, he kind of just does his job quietly, and there might be a sack here and there. But overall he seems to do his job adequately enough for me. Whereas Sweezy, he's got so many up and down moments where you can watch it and be like, where's the consistency here? So I think it would be a fair assumption to assume Okung would get more if they had to choose.
Yeah, for sure. Now, probably one of the more disappointing results of this free agent period for myself, as someone who wrote about him and got a follow on Twitter from him, Bruce Irvin. He's a goner, right?
I think so. I mean, I was really floored when he gave his whole, $3-4 million. I'd take that to stay in Seattle. And it immediately brought me back to the whole Golden Tate, Michael Bennett situation from a couple of years ago, where Tate was going to take the hometown discount, and Michael Bennett saying, "This isn't Costco. I'm going to want to go out and be paid." And then we saw the complete flip side of that happen. So I don't want to fall into that trap a second time. So I've got to figure Irvin, he's going to get an opportunity, maybe in the Falcons if they offer him some money. I think he'd be tempted to see that right away and go, you know what, this is where my true value is, and leave. So I think he's a goner.
Yeah. And also I think if they tag him, it's 13, 14 million for the franchise tag. And for someone who has never got double figures in sacks, that's quite a hefty number. I mean, you can accredit that for Von Miller, DeMarcus Ware type, but as good and as fun as Bruce Irvin is, like the first time I went to Seattle 18 months ago, he had one of the more remarkable pick sixes against the Raiders where he tipped it up to himself and did a 180 spin and then ran 30, 40 yards back without even a care in the world. And it was just all-world athleticism from him, and it's something. But he could be like Jermaine Kearse. He could be best off staying, but he, as you say, Atlanta probably would be at the front of the queue unless they obviously got Shaq Lawson coming in this draft. If they could pair up with Vic Beasley, but if you pair up Bruce with Vic Beasley, and you got the young corners they've got in the Falcons, Dan Quinn has a very familiar looking defense in Atlanta in certain extent. So yeah, I don't think Bruce Irvin will be a Seahawk. I think that's the more confirmed one where I think it will be too rich for the blood. Now for me, I wrote about him, and I said that he was the one we have to keep above all others. Jeremy Lane. I think how he played. Obviously, the Steelers game was not great for him, but I think that was a case of him blowing off the cobwebs and all that by going up against Marcus Wheaton. I think the improvement the defense made with him and shared opposite Sherman and next to Thomas, both outside and then at slot, I think they both deserve to be paid. But obviously, Lane's probably going to be the higher priced contract this year, and I think he has someone that the Seahawks just cannot afford to let slip, because while they could draft someone like Sean Davis or Cannaday in the draft, they're not going to go the Kerry Williams route in the free agent market. You wouldn't suspect. So for me, I think Jeremy Lane's he's a got to keep, I think. Ken?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, he's been such a sturdy nickel corner, working his way up, learning the Seattle techniques, and you can't find that in the free agent pool. And if you draft anyone, no matter how high, there's going to be some kind of adjustment period. And so for a guy that knows how to play Seahawks football, be in the secondary, and he's made good plays and make some good reads on the ball, I think he's a must keep, particularly when you look at the other guys around him on the depth chart, a guy like Shed and Simon, not quite ready kind of guys. If you threw them in there, if you threw them in there, they'd be okay. But Lane is a step above.
Yeah, and then you've got Stanley John Baptiste, who they've signed to a futures. You've got Mo Sese, who's still around. I think George Farmer, Doug McNeil, I think they're converts from wide receiver, aren't they? Yep. As you said, they're not at the same experience level and teaching level that Lane has had over 3-4 years in the system under the wing of Sherman and Brown, obviously Maxwell before. But I don't think they make it three years on the trot where they lose the starting corner opposite Sherman. I think they have to keep him. I think they do. Is there anyone else who I haven't mentioned in the free agent list? Obviously, you got Deshaun Sheds on the exclusive rights or restricted free agent list. I think Ricardo Lockett is on that list as well, but his football future seems up in the air still. Is there anyone else who you would like to see them keep who's on that list?
No, I think the ones at the top, I think we generated good discussion on, and those I think they're definitely going to be the high priority going forward, and it really set the tone for anything else that happens in free agency.
I think if they can add, obviously, actually there are actually two that we haven't mentioned up front. I wrote about in one piece. There's Tuba Rubin and Brandon Mebane. I said in a piece that we keep Rubin because he's cheaper to keep and let Mebane walk. I'm sticking to that. Do you agree that would be something that's what they should or what they will do with those two?
Yeah, I mean, keeping one of them at least is a good idea. It's going to be hard to get both. I mean, veteran deals. They'll be wanting to cash in at least a little bit. I really like what Rubin offered this season, and obviously with the draft picks that we have, we're getting a couple more via compensatory picks. So being such a defensively minded draft upcoming, I think you go younger, you go for depth instead of trying to retain both those guys, no matter how good they might be when they're both on the field together as run stuffers.
And also, as we mentioned earlier, this defensive line class is pretty stacked all the way
It's fantastic
as well. So that is something that could come into the equation when they decide on which one and how rich it gets. Obviously, there's two other contract deals that we could be seeing to force upon the Seahawks this year with Cam Chancellor's holdout last year, Mike Bennett threatening and wanting to be paid as well. We'll start with Cam. How do you see that? It's starting to sound like we might have seen the last of Cam Chancellor in Seattle. With how Carlton McRae played, there seems to be a want to justify the fact that he might not be a Seahawk next year. Do you think Cam Chancellor's played his last snap in Seattle?
I think he's going to stay a Seahawk. I mean, I can't envision anyone else stepping up right away that would make the Legion of Boom as dangerous as it is up the middle. And he's such an enforcer. There really aren't a ton of guys like him. And if there are, they're being paid huge amounts of money already by other teams. And so when you have an asset like that, no matter how the offseason went, I mean, when you knew he was coming back, you knew the defense was going to fare even better, if not right away, then gradually. And I think that was shown with Chancellor's presence once he came back. And so I think he's too good to ship off right away. I think you let it go out as it is.
Yeah, I'm starting to think that he might be a goner. If I don't think they buckle to him a year on from how he went about it last year. I think his body seems. I think he seems to realise his body's breaking down. That his window for a career and for a payday is closing. But if he threatens to hold out, I think the Seahawks could feasibly look to sever ties with him because there seems to be some smoke, and usually when there's smoke, there's fire. So it would be something to keep an eye on. And Carlton McRae was pretty solid, if not spectacular, deputising for him when he missed a couple of games. And I think that possibly could help make their decision. And obviously then if he does threaten and they do want to leave, it then comes down to trade price and what the Seahawks could get. I don't know how the cap hit would work if he is traded, but it's something I think compared to 2-3 months ago, I'm more convinced that he won't be a Seahawk in 2016 than he will be. The other one obviously is Mike Bennett. Do you think they pay him or do you think he keeps quiet?
Well, I hope he keeps quiet. Every single year it's the same story and it kind of gets old right away. He got the contract extension. He's been playing up to it. I mean, if he wants to keep having this discussion every single year, the Seahawks are just going to give him the same response. And I think what we saw this past offseason was a good enough growth from him, knowing that he had to come into camp and be ready to go be a mentor to younger guys and be a contributor right away on the defensive line, because he is now one of those faces of the defense. And he recognized that this past offseason. So I'm more of the opinion that we're not going to see as much ho-hum about the contract situation for him. I mean, he's still getting paid good money, and I think he recognizes that. Obviously, every player who keeps doing well is going to want more, but the reality of the situation is it's a good contract right now. He's a face of the defense, and there are added responsibilities to his personality and his perception by his other teammates.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but I think it's something which they do address this offseason, whether it's an extension or whether it's just a little boost which they give, like they give Marshall Lynch a couple of years ago. I think it's something which they do reward him for how he went about things last summer. He could have easily held out as he repeated, and then the season he had, I think he was one of the top 3 or 5 interior defensive tackles in the league, and probably top 3, not named JJ Watt. So I think it's something which they will address this year. How they address it, I don't know. You probably can't really do anything until, as we said, you sort out the 17 free agents you've got. I think that's more pressing than paying Michael Bennett and Cam Chancellor. Whether they agree with that or not is up for discussion, but I think it's something which they do address this year. I don't think they let him play another year on his current contract. I think they do sweeten the pot a bit for Mike Bennett this year.
Okay, it's fair. I mean, if they rearrange some of the base salaries or whatever kind of creativity they can get. I mean, if it's nothing outlandish, I think I'll be okay with it. Is that every single year he keeps contributing, keeps being a disruptive presence, both on the outside and the inside, and you don't find that a lot.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think they will sort it out by giving him like $100 million contract or whatever Von Miller's going to get. But I think they will, kind of like they did with Marshall Lynch a couple of years ago, where they just added a few years to his guaranteed money or signing bonus, whatever it was they did. But I think it's something they definitely look to address. Something which has just been broached on the Facebook group over here, the UK Seahawks fans Facebook group. Softy on KJR has apparently brought up the topic of Sean Alexander and how the Seahawks commemorate what he did for the team in the early part of the millennium. Sean Alexander's Ring of Honor material, isn't he?
Oh, I think so. I mean, every single year he was a fantastic presence for them, being one of the best running backs in the NFL. I mean, it seems like a no-brainer right away.
Even without Sean Alexander Ring of Honor, I mean, do you think he's a Hall of Famer, or do you think it was such a short window he produced in that it kind of rules him out?
You know what? That's a fair argument that it was a short window. I think he still gets consideration, kind of like what we're talking about with Marshawn Lynch. He had a revitalization part of his career that might not be as long as other Hall of Fame candidates that we're obviously thinking of when Peyton Manning and Tom Brady will retire. We can look at a long window of time that they played and see what they did. But I think the short window guys are still capable of getting that kind of consideration. I mean, it's sometimes even more impressive in a couple of years with a burst of potential and activity. I think it makes for a fun consideration, I think.
Yeah, and he did break an NFL record, and that will be something which, obviously, it's a record which didn't last very long. It lasted longer than Melvin Gordon's record lasted in college, but yeah, it's something. I don't think he's a Hall of Fame. I think he is a no-brainer Ring of Honor. I'm actually quite surprised he's not already up there. If Walter Jones is up there so soon, I think Sean Alexander should be next in the queue. Obviously, with the combine coming up, names could pop up. Is there anyone that you're looking at covering for the Drafting Seahawks series we've got going? Is there anyone we could look forward to or analysis?
You know, I've been looking at a lot of first round guys. I haven't branched out yet into the diamond of the rough kind of talks that we like to do. I think those are really, really fun, especially when we start doing entire mock drafts. So I've got to widen my scope from the first round, but I'm still going to look at guys like Jonathan Bullard and Meliak Collins of Nebraska, two guys on the defensive interior who might also rush from the outside, who's got great first steps, and that should be on full display in the combine with that burst of acceleration off the line. So I think that'll stand out to people, and those are two guys who could be available at 26. And as much as I like Jack Conklin, at the same time, Seahawks, a lot of scouts really think that we're going to go defensive with that first round pick.
Yeah, I saw a mock draft yesterday. It was more of a case of someone's going to pick him here at 26, but Ezekiel Elliott was the pick at 26.
Interesting.
That's a new one. I think Dan Kadar at mocking the draft. His last 2 or 3 mocks, he's had Shaq Lawson at 26, and that seems unrealistic. But he's someone who is a draft czar, so that could be something to keep track of if he doesn't impress. But I think he's been talking up Clemson reunion in Atlanta today. So Shaq Lawson is someone I keep seeing. I'm going, that doesn't seem likely. But if Dan Kadar keeps banging that drum, I think people are going to start listening.
Yeah, it really depends on what the teams in front of us are doing. There are a lot of defensive-minded franchises right now. I mean, the Falcons for sure, like we've been talking about. Detroit could be looking at defensive interior linemen, and based on who they select, if somebody falls that we might have thought would have been a top 15 kind of guy, and he somehow slips to us at 26, that'll change the strategy, I think.
Yeah, I think like people like Noah Spence are people that I keep seeing put with Detroit. I think that's someone. As we stand right now, then, if the Seahawks run the clock within the next hour, who do they take at 26 as we stand right now?
I got to go Conklin. I mean, as much as I would like to see the Seahawks go out and get a free agent like Osemele who could play left tackle right away and do well, I mean, you got to keep protecting Russell Wilson, not just because of the money now attached to him, but what we just saw this past season. If he leads the offense and is protected, we're going to go to another Super Bowl unless the Panthers get in our way. So it just has to be a priority. I mean, protecting him. You can find diamonds in the rough with this heavy defensive draft in the later rounds, and the premier offensive line talent are going to go very quickly right away. And then you go into the kind of projects that we'll think of in a guy like Terry Poole, Mark Lewinsky, who may not be ready right away to contribute. And that's got to be my number one priority need, someone who contribute right away and protect Russell Wilson and not lead to an almost disastrous first half in which he's on pace to get sacked, 80, 90 times by the end of the year. I think you got to go offensive tackle.
Yeah. So you're putting Conklin at left, are you, as well, yeah?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I too have heard, Gilliam sliding over. I think he did fairly well over at right tackle. I don't like guys switching over all the time. I mean, we saw that this past season, and it was right up to the wire throwing guys at different positions. And I'd like to see just an overall strategy right away. Develop Gilliam further at right tackle. And
week one preseason, we want the 5 up front to be the 5 up front.
Yeah.
I think 3 or 4 when they decided on the makeup as it was with Nowak. But yeah, I agree. I think Conklin is, for me this year, he's currently he's my 2016 DGB. I think he's the one who I'm going to be banging that drum that we draft all spring until April 28th or 29th, whenever the first round is. He is an absolute mauler. I think he, as you say, it'll be addresses the situation. You put money to address the issue of the offensive line with the first round pick. The money he's probably going to get at 26, but also he's got the versatility that Cable seems to like in his lineman, because I think he could easily play it right. He could even play in the middle. I think another one they could look at will be Spriggs, who could also slide all over the place as well. But I think right now, if the pick was in an hour, I think it's Jack Conklin at 26. Yeah, I think that's everything. We'll try and get another one he's done maybe before free agency starts on March 7th. If not, we'll wait a few days, a week or so, and see what happens with Curse and Akun and Sweezy. But obviously, definitely we'll be kicking up the draft coverage on the website with Drafting Seahawks and all that regalia. But yeah, enjoy the combine for what you get to watch. Hopefully, our boy Conklin doesn't impress too much, so he doesn't fly out the draft boards. But hopefully, we don't sound stupid in this time next year when he's out of the league and playing for the Edmonton Eskimos or something. So hopefully, yeah. But yeah, enjoy what you can catch of the combine. Hopefully, we'll catch up in a few weeks. Cheers for this, Ken.
All right. Thanks, Stuart.
Cheers. Thank you.